Hi, I'm Tori Crone with Proactive Therapy in Chicago.
And I'm Betsy Callan with Proactive Therapy in Chicago. This is one of this series of webinars we are doing to address different things that are coming up for our clients during this quarantine. So if you have any ideas for a topic that you want us to cover, please feel free to email me at Betsy, Betsy, at proactive-therapy.com. So Tori, what are some things that your clients are struggling with this week?
So I think that in the first week or two, people were kind of getting used to this new normal. And some clients even described it sort of like a snow day, like have this imposed vacation almost. And, certainly not with all the excitement, maybe because it's such a grim time too. But there was this sense of things are different and I'm being forced to work from home. And this is new. And now I think people are more in the grief stage and really recognizing that we don't know when this is going to end. And it feels very uncertain and a lot scarier than I think it did even a few weeks ago. So I think people are really settling into that.
Completely. And I think with this helplessness comes a lack of structure and then a lot of self-criticism about that lack of structure. So I really think that it's so important to acknowledge what we think we should be doing and if that really is accurate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're noticing that a lot of people are having shoulds with this time. I should be
Totally.
homeschooling a certain way. I should be exercising. I should be eating a certain way. Things like that are coming up a lot.
Absolutely. Yes. And also, I should be doing all the things that I never had time to do.
Mhm.
And I have to ask why and where are we getting that messaging? And a lot of my clients are saying it's from social media. So we're in this predicament because in a lot of ways people feel connected to others through social media, but they're also following accounts that are saying, I'm doing this amazing meal regimen and I'm working out every day.
Yeah.
And also this fear of gaining weight, which is so detrimental, especially to my clients who are struggling with eating disorders.
Right, right. We have to remember that what people put on social media is a curated small amount of potentially their whole day or their whole week. It's really not the reality.
Completely.
And that these people are profiting off of this time. And
Yeah.
so, and they're not experts. Most of the people who are on there are just people who are giving their opinions, really not rooted in any kind of science or educational background that they have. So we have to be really careful about what we're exposing ourselves to.
Completely. And also acknowledging that everyone is having a different experience and a different journey through this. So if people are scrolling through their feed and seeing a lot of posts about, wow, I'm learning so many things about myself. This has been so enlightening for me in a lot of ways. That can be really difficult for someone who's having a really bad day or a really hard time in general.
Right, right. It's a polarizing time. So we know that when people deal with distress, they can often go in one of two ways. It can be that they overly, they're kind of in a hyperdrive of doing more, trying to stick with a routine or be kind of rigid in a lot of ways. And then on the flip side, people can also kind of slow down, withdraw,
Mhm.
numb out. And both of these extremes are probably not very helpful during this time.
Completely. And we just have to also remember that there is no right way to deal with the pandemic. I mean,
Yeah.
this is something none of us have ever experienced. And, I compare it to, if it's hurricane season, people who live in these areas are like, okay, this is what we do. We know what to do. And we just don't. This has never happened to any of us. And so I really encourage people to remember we're all navigating this together. And like you said, there is no right way.
Right, right. It's just crisis, it's survival. And
Mhm.
maybe one week you're in kind of the hyperdrive mode, and another week you're taking a whole lot of naps and you're slowing down. Both of them
Exactly.
more than okay.
Completely. Completely. And, you know, really listening to what your body needs in terms of food and exercise too. There's so many different, like even jokes made about this gaining weight in quarantine and how scary that must be. And again, for those with eating disorders, I'm encouraging people to stick with their recovery, stick with what they know that their body needs right now as
Mhm.
well, instead of trying to look to these different influencers to get the answers.
Mhm. So, what would you recommend if people are kind of stuck in this should place? What are some ideas to help people limit that?
Yeah, well, I think a huge thing is unfollowing the accounts that are not helpful for you. And I think a lot of people think it's not a big deal, but these messages are insidious and they really get in our brain without us even realizing it. So I'm really encouraging people to go through their follow list, be like, is this account in line with my values right now? And I also encourage people to check out our Instagram page, Proactive Therapy Chicago, because we follow a lot of accounts that promote balance and self-compassion and kindness in this time, so that they can start flooding their feed with messages that I think will be healthier for them overall, both physically and mentally.
Yeah, it's a tricky time because people want to feel connected. And so they're often turning to social media feeling like I'm being social, that I am connecting with
Yes.
people through this way. But it's really not the reality of the experience of scrolling through
Mhm.
people's lives. Um,
Absolutely.
so it
And
might,
I
yeah,
Oh no, I was just gonna say, it's so important to think, is this the way I want my connection, or should I be contacting people individually too?
yeah,
And with that being said, there can then be the should of, oh, I should be talking to my friends and family every day.
uh-huh.
And asking yourself, do I really want to talk to someone right now? Or do I just need some time to reflect and relax?
Right, right. So in addition to unfollowing things that are unhelpful, um, and one thing that you've mentioned to me before, Betsy, is that people can really think about, is this account helping me? Is this account making me feel good? Or is this something that's kind of bringing me down? And if
Yeah,
you check in with yourself and you're feeling like it's something bringing you down, then that's really not worth our time. It's worth
completely. And
following.
I know some people might feel uncomfortable actually unfollowing a certain account, especially if it's maybe a person in their lives. So I really encourage them to mute the notification, mute the story notification or the post notification. That way it doesn't feel like such a commitment to completely unfollow in the moment.
Yeah. Another thought is just to go off of social media altogether.
Yes, that too.
I know that you've
Yes.
heard that in the past. Did you have a good experience
Hmm.
with that?
Have people actually
When
turned
you
it off?
when you tried it, did you have a
Oh yeah, I actually did turn off my social media personally
yeah.
for a week, and it was awesome. And I simply just deleted the app from my phone because you don't even realize how you mindlessly will just click on it. And I actually realized that the most when I deleted it from my app, and how I would just like mindlessly go to where it used to be.
Yeah.
And it was
Wow.
just a really good way to connect and reflect on what I actually needed that day rather than what other people were doing.
Right, right. Yeah, so that kind of brings us to suggestion number 2, which would be
Yep.
to really think about if there was no social media during this time, if there wasn't all of this connection with other people who are telling you what they might be doing, what would you want to be doing with this time? Um,
Mhm.
kind of reevaluating your values in the context of this this pandemic and this situation. And if you look back in 10 years on this time, what do you want to say that this time was about? What do you want to say?
Mhm.
How do you want to say that you handled it? That you
Mhm.
responded to it. And it might not be that you just did all the things, that you learned a new language. And maybe it is that for
Mhm.
somebody. But other people, maybe it's that you slowed down and you kind of got reconnected with yourself or with
Absolutely.
what matters to you. Um,
Mhm.
so really kind of taking a few minutes every day to think about that. What do I want to make this day about?
Absolutely. And I keep on thinking of that coin or that term you coined, the intuitive living. And I would love for you to be able to talk more about that because it really resonated with me when you've talked about it in the past.
Yeah. So we talk to a lot of our clients about intuitive eating and how it's sort of this learning to trust your body, learning to trust the wisdom of your body, your hunger cues, your fullness cues, eating what you feel like in the moment. And we can do the same thing with general living. We can also learn to trust that we might not need a schedule to tell us what we feel like doing in terms of exercise that day.
Mhm.
Maybe that
Mhm.
day, maybe one day it's that you feel like doing a yoga video on YouTube and that feels good to your body. I know that helps my neck pain a lot. So it
Mhm.
feels good. Other days I feel more energized and I just feel like walking outside and being in the sunshine. Other days I take a nap. And so I think it's really about getting in touch with the things that are gonna really bring us meaning and value, but also make us feel good.
Mhm. Completely, completely. And I think to piggyback off that leads us to our next point is how are we talking to ourselves when we are engaging in this intuitive living?
Right.
So when we're noticing that the shoulds are coming up, a lot of times that then leads to critical self-talk.
Right.
And all of our clinicians at our practice very much promote a stance of self-compassion.
Mhm.
And it seems counterintuitive because so many people believe that if they beat themselves up enough, they'll make a different choice or create behavior change. But really, research is showing that's just not true.
Right. It's so common. And I'll talk to people about looking back on a mentor or somebody who really lifted them up and somebody that they felt motivated by and ask, how did that person talk to you? And I've
Mhm.
never heard that somebody said they yelled at me, they screamed at me, they told
Never.
me it was worthless. That,
Yes.
that's sometimes the way that we talk to ourselves. And all the research shows that that's really unmotivating and it doesn't
Mhm.
help move us forward. So
Right.
during this time, we want to be really mindful of engaging in self compassion.
Completely. And so, for those of us who have been speaking to ourselves in a critical way for years and years,
Mhm.
we'll be like, how do I even start to do that?
Yeah.
So, an exercise I like to have my clients try first is simply saying, okay, let's say your friend just called you and told you everything you just told me. You
Mhm.
tell me what your response would be to them.
Mhm.
And it is mind blowing to see how different it is the way that we would speak to a loved one versus ourselves. And it begs the question of why. Why
Right.
are we speaking to ourselves in such a different way, a way that's so unkind?
Right. Yeah. And if that person followed you around all day and said all the things that you say to yourself, you can ask yourself, would I have a good day or a bad day
Yeah,
if I were around that person all day?
definitely a bad day for me. I would not want those things to be said to
Yes.
me, for
Yeah.
sure.
So there
For
are
sure.
really three components of self-compassion. And the first one you've spoken to, Betsy, in terms of
Hmm.
having a really gentle and kind voice to yourselves, noticing the judgments and being able
Hmm.
to just kind of observe them from a distance without getting really caught up in them. It doesn't mean that we're always going to have positive things to say to ourselves and really affirming or uplifting things, but being able to notice when we're not talking that way and really just kind of observing it from a distance.
Hmm.
That's really step one. Um,
Hmm.
Step two is realizing the common humanity of the struggle. So right now we're all in this together. We're not alone.
More than ever.
We
Yes.
are, and even though some people's struggles might look slightly different, we're hearing the same themes over and over. People are grieving.
Hmm.
People are dealing with really difficult emotions. People are worried about loved ones. So we're really facing a lot of things in common right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of connection, it's not just calling or FaceTiming a loved one, it's also just reflecting on the fact that truly everyone is having some sort of reaction to what is going on and how that thread, I mean, this is so unique to anything we've ever experienced before because, you're struggling with something that no one else can relate to, or very few people can relate to maybe in that moment. But
Mhm.
now we all are in the shelter in place. And while we're affected differently, it's all the same umbrella.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And then part three is really mindfulness versus over identification. So when these difficult thoughts and feelings show up, being mindful of them rather than trying to suppress them or numb them or push them down. That's really, if we're numbing our pain or our thoughts and our feelings, then we're really not able to be compassionate.
Hmm.
So that's the mindfulness aspect, is being aware of what you're even feeling and what you're thinking during these times. And then on the flip side, we can over identify with our thoughts and feelings where we get so caught up in them that they're kind of right in front of our face and they're running the show. And so we
Hmm.
want to find this balance, this kind of gray zone between um, numbing them out and being so overly flooded by them and being so overly controlled by them. And in this middle space is kind of that mindful space, this mindful awareness of what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling without it letting it run the show.
Absolutely. And really thinking that in this time for a lot of us, we have no choice but to sit with these feelings. And my hope for a lot of people is that it doesn't have to be so scary anymore, right? How can we then take that same concept of sitting with these feelings and working through them even after quarantine?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point.
So a lot of this research was developed by Kristen Neff.
Mm-hmm.
And I very much encourage my clients to check out her website. I believe it's selfcompassion.com or .org.
Mm-hmm.
And she has some wonderful self-compassion exercises. So I've been having my clients do these between sessions, and then we can talk about them afterward. And it's been really incredible to see the difference in, like you mentioned before, motivation, mood, overall mental and physical well-being when my clients are engaging in these actions.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. So to recap, we're talking about limiting exposure to unhelpful things on social media, really checking in with your values and what you want to make this time about, and kind of intuitive living practices. And 3 is self compassion and really being able to talk to yourself in a different way throughout this time. So I think that's all we've got for you today. Thank you so
Yes,
much. Again,
thank
reach
you.
out if you want any extra support one on one, and we'll hope to bring you another video soon.
Bye.
Bye.